Wow, what a couple of days it has been. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't expecting for the Forrest Frank video to be as insane as it has been. I cannot express to you how thankful I am for the people that are leaving really kind comments about this. I had no idea that it would get to this point. I really didn't. And I knew when I posted it that I wanted to do a follow-up because truthfully, there's just a lot that was left on the cutting room floor or things that had just not happened yet when I had finished the video. And so I wanted to kind of like clear some of that up. Nobody is making me do this video. You know, people are going to think I've been like zombified or something like that, but I have not been zombified by Forrest Frank or his team. I'm purely just making this for my channel and to answer some other questions that are super fun. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, we've got a comment that says, it really exposed Forrest for me and just makes it difficult to find good Christian artists to listen to, as most are very controversial. This is a really interesting thing because I'm reading this comment to kind of give you why I made the video, because there were a ton of comments like this that kind of surprised me. When I went out to make this video, it was because I didn't really know anything about Forrest. I didn't listen to his music. I mean, it was just so many questions floating out there on the internet. And so my thought was, let me take all of these questions that we're seeing and let me find what everybody is kind of saying about them, both sides of them, and simply deliver the information. So this is a type of documentary where I don't really answer much of my own questions, or I don't answer much of other people's questions as much as I just present what the conversations are around them. And that is a good and a bad thing, because I've seen like so many comments on all sides of this. I saw a comment where someone was like, Forrest should be in jail. And I was like, what? No, this is not like, this is not what I meant from this video. I simply was using Forrest and like his marketing and his stuff to try to have like a broader conversation around how do we market as Christians. I mean, I think about this all the time, having a YouTube channel and my own music. How do I market in a way that my conscience can be clear? How can I market or promote myself in a way without taking and promoting things that aren't Jesus? Like, it's a real tug of war. And I know that Forrest has like even posted stuff where he says he feels conflicted on that. I think that's super fair. And so I found it interesting just how dual-sided this whole thing was. And part of that could be that a lot of the questions we see online are like not in good faith. And some are in good faith, but most of the time when you get online, questions that people ask are negative. And so this video was not meant to be a negative thing where I'm like, oh yeah, everybody like burn your Forrest CDs. It's meant to just bring into the conversation this idea of how do we approach things like this? How do we approach business as a Christian? So for people that are like watching my video and are like, oh, Jonathan is exposing Forrest Frank, I'm just talking about all of the discourse that's happening online. And truthfully, I really hope that you didn't leave my video hating Forrest Frank. I don't think that's deserved. In fact, I was like praying for Forrest before I posted the video because I was thinking, man, this guy's under so much pressure and under such a big microscope that it's kind of like unbelievable how many people are just pulling at him. Next comment. Not gonna lie, I've never heard of this person until your video, but unrelated, the production quality is insane. You're very talented. Thank you. This is a two-part answer. When I started this video, I knew I wanted to talk about the marketing aspects of Forrest and just as a whole with CCM. But then I realized, like, wait a second, the reach on this video is going to be very specific if I don't talk about who Forrest is and like how he came up and where he came from. So that's what kind of caused like all the digging into his past and like digging into his school and all of this stuff. The whole purpose with talking about all that was to give people like this an idea of like, hey, here's this guy, here's where he came from, here's kind of like what we know. And then that lead into like the bigger conversation around like the devil warts and all of that stuff. People again really love him, or they really want to find like more reason to hate him. So as that story was growing, I started thinking, okay, I want to film it in a different way. I'm going to take a bigger swing with this because I do this for a living. Like, I make videos and I do social media content and I edit for other content creators. Like, I just wanted to have fun with it and make a different style for the channel and start leaning more that direction. And so that's how we wound up here. Next comment says, I don't know how people don't know Forrest was on Surfaces. Yeah, this was really confusing for me too, because, Surfaces was, super massive. And I got a lot of comments from people that closely followed Surfaces the whole time. And I even had some information come forward where they pointed out that the last album that Forrest was on with Surfaces, I don't know that it flopped, but it just didn't do well. And I even checked behind people to see that. And so I guess what's interesting is you look at the career of Surfaces at first and you're like, oh my goodness, all the money is working and all this stuff is happening. But truthfully, even when you do a follow-up album and it's still the same iteration of the group, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a magic button. And that's true. There are so many artists that people pour money into and they just don't take off. And then sometimes you do have a song that just blows up. So that's a little bit of clarity on that. I think the Surfaces thing, there's just so much that we don't know. And there was only so much digging I wanted to do because it seemed very tense and it seemed like it was handled behind closed doors and maybe for a good reason. Next one says, I like your video, but Forrest might not own his label. Yeah, this is another piece of clarity I got after the fact from people that work in the industry. So from best I can gather it, Forrest owns his label, but there is maybe an imprint of it in some way and connected across all of this stuff that is probably just too complicated for me to even get into. But this does bring up that I had a band that reached out and they were like, hey, our music actually did get submitted to the Dove Awards without us knowing. And it was via management or something because they're also independent. And so this is a very likely chance that Forrest didn't submit his own music to the Dove Awards, but instead it was submitted for him. This one says, I was at the GCU Unite event. Forrest did a great job and gave a message that many people needed to hear. This is great because I actually kept going and kind of talking to people that were actually at or involved with GCU Unite. And more people actually came to me after the video came out because, again, I didn't know the volume that this video was going to do, but it put me in contact with a lot of really interesting people. So what appears to be the case is that this was not something that Forrest had planned to do and that it was him doing a favor. And so that does change the connotation of this, right? Involving him getting paid. It does change the connotation of, oh, is Forrest not going to plan, not going to write a sermon? And I can't imagine a bigger nightmare than getting thrown in front of 10,000 people and being like, oh, guess I gotta speak now. That's a little bit how I feel right now because I didn't know so many people were gonna watch this video. So again, in the spirit of trying to be fair and honest, it does appear that Forrest did not take money and did not know the extent at what he was going to do there. But I did get a message from some people saying that he discussed self-harm and things like that and that it was super helpful for a lot of people there. So that's pretty cool. This was even discussed on a Ruslan KD video. He put out a reaction video to my video and I watched it and I thought, oh man, I didn't realize people were maybe going to take my tone this way or take the video this way where it seemed like I just absolutely hated Forrest or something. And he made two really solid points in his video that I had not considered or had missed. One being that he clarified a little bit of the timeline with Corey and with Forrest. Forrest had filmed and done the video but was unsure of if he was going to post it or not. And then it ended up that Corey and him ended up in a conversation and Forrest said, well, I actually had already made a response. I'm thinking about posting it. I may not. I believe I've got that right. The other thing that he brought up that I thought was really good and it was a good call out was there is a free tier on the Treehouse group that I wasn't aware of. I totally missed that somehow. I ended up paying to get into the Treehouse when I didn't need to. So that's a little bit disappointing. But in that free tier, you don't get access to some of the higher stuff like albums or walkthroughs, things like that. It's very similar to Patreon. I thought it was a good call out. And in fact, a lot of people were really mad in my comments, or they were mad in Ruslan's comments and things like that. That wasn't, to me, a bad call out. I'm glad that he brought that forward. In fact, I actually ended up connecting with Ruslan after the video came out and after his reaction came out. We had a really good conversation, and it was one of those things where, like, I told him I didn't want my tone to come across like this super I've got you kind of thing going on, but when I ask questions and don't answer them, it kind of allows people to come up with their own opinions. And for Ruslan, it's like he's defending his friend. I understand. When we had our conversation, I told him this wasn't supposed to be a hit piece, and he actually adjusted his title because he understood better where my heart was with this. We'll do one more serious comment, and then we'll get to some fun ones. This one says, I don't know, man. Maybe I missed it, but I thought it was obvious it was simply an advertisement for the song Good Day. I never thought it was meant to be him making it on the spot. And you got several replies and people thumbsing this up. Yeah. That's what makes it so difficult with marketing. You look at this and someone is like, I understand this is a skit. I saw it as nothing else other than that. And that person may be the majority. And then you have people all the way on the other side that like don't understand that concept. And what that means is like anybody trying to market or anybody trying to make anything is trying to hit a moving target. I think as a general rule, when we go on the internet and we see things from artists or we see things from anybody, YouTubers, whoever, take it with a grain of salt that it may be marketing and that it may just be something taking advantage of the algorithm. And people's convictions can fall all over the map there, but the truth is everyone's heart is also different. My heart on how I'm going to feel about marketing is going to be completely different than maybe how Forrest feels about it. So in other words, we can give some grace where grace is due and understand that people are very different. Not only are people different, but people change and they grow. I know that even just by doing this video, I've grown. I've learned things that I want to do better. And I know that Forrest is going through that same process. I know that everybody watching this video is going through that same process. And so we need to be willing not to just say, oh, like I'm burning Forrest's albums or, oh, I'm unsubscribing from Jonathan. We hate him. All of us change and all of us handle life a little bit differently. And God works in us in all completely different ways at times. Let's get to some lighter comments. This comment says, it sounds like his father could be a house flipper. That's super interesting. I didn't even consider a house flipper. Once again, I tried to run all the information that I could. Didn't even think about that. However, I did get sent something from someone else that was an interview where Forrest actually expressed that his parents were not super supportive when he first quit his job to pursue music. And in that interview, I think he said he had to work construction. So there could be a connection there. This one says his music is dope. You know what's interesting is how subjective music truly, truly is. I make music and I have been told time and time again that people like it. I've been told time and time again that people were like, it's not for me. When I started this video, I even said, I don't get Forrest music. All through the comments are people being like, I love his music. My kids love his music. It gives us something we can listen to. It's fun. It helps me feel better. It truly is fascinating to me how different people can be. I lied. It's one more serious comment, and I'll end it with this one. Young artists are generally not expected to be the pinnacles of consistency and maturity until they become famous. Then, as if musical ability is a substitute for biblical qualifications and discipleship, we treat them as pastors, prophets, or worse yet, idols. We need to allow people to be part of the body of Christ that they were equipped to be in. All Forrest Frank has to be to me is an imperfect entertainer. Everything else is between him and God and his local church. There's a lot I like about this comment. In fact, it kind of speaks to one of the things that I felt burdened by as I was making the video, which was the immense pressure that Forrest is under. Even the question at the end of my video, is Forrest good for CCM? I left it open-ended because truthfully, everybody already has such a big opinion about it. My opinion is Forrest is good for CCM whether you want him to be or not. There's so many people that are talking about his music. They're talking about conversations. They're going to shows. Even if they're not a fan of his music, they're having these conversations because of Forrest. But this comment is right. You know, there's all of this pressure that suddenly appears when a person becomes famous, whether they want it or not. It comes with the deal. And at the same time, what happens with Forrest internally and how Forrest lives his life and his family is led, all of this stuff is ultimately between him and God and under the accountability of his local church. Definitely not a YouTuber, and definitely not the people in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope this clears up some of the questions people had for me in the comments or things that were brought to light and sent to me. I hope that this helped with that. And more than anything, I hope it kind of like helps with the hate that I'm seeing in the comments, because I want my channel to be somewhere where we can have important discussions, but I don't want it to be somewhere where people are just so full of hatred for somebody that they don't know. So again, we can chill out in the comments, even on this video.